There is a strange moment in wealth building when the number on the screen becomes large enough to be serious, but not large enough to make you free. That moment often arrives around $300,000. You open the account and see the number 300,000. It is real money, more than most people ever manage to invest in their entire lifetime. It represents years of work, restraint, delayed gratification, and quiet decisions that nobody applauded when you made them. And yet your life does not suddenly change. You still wake up early, you still go to work, you still answer messages, you still deal with deadlines, bills, responsibilities, inflation, and the pressure of needing income. You are not retired, you are not financially independent, you are not free. So a quiet thought begins to form. If $300,000 does not change everything, what actually will? That question is dangerous if you answer it emotionally. It can make you impatient. It can make you believe the system is not working. It can make you chase shortcuts, upgrade your lifestyle, sell during fear, or interrupt the very machine you spent years building. But if you answer it structurally, it becomes one of the most important questions in personal finance, because $300,000 is not the finish line. It is the turning point. Most people think wealth grows in a straight line. If it took 10 or 15 years to reach 300,000, then reaching 1 million must simply mean repeating the same process 3 more times. Save more, invest more. Wait longer, repeat. That sounds logical, but it is wrong. The journey from 0 to 300,000 and the journey from 300,000 to 1 million are not the same journey. From 0 to 300,000, almost everything came from you: your paycheck, your discipline, your sacrifices, your willingness to say no while other people said yes, your ability to keep investing when the number was too small to feel meaningful, your ability to avoid lifestyle creep when friends looked like they were, your ability to keep going when progress felt painfully slow. In the early stage, compounding barely seems alive. At $10,000, an 8% return is $800. Nice, but not life-changing. At $50,000, an 8% return is $4,000. Better, but your paycheck is still doing most of the work. At $100,000, an 8% return is $8,000. But you are still the main engine. Even at $200,000, an 8% return is $16,000. That is meaningful. But for many disciplined savers, their annual contributions still carry most of the progress. Then the account reaches $300,000. At an 8% return, $300,000 can produce $24,000 in 1 year. Now the math begins to speak differently. Imagine you earn $90,000 a year and save 20% of your income. That means you invest about $18,000 a year. That is excellent discipline. Most people never sustain that. But once you have $300,000 invested, a normal 8% return produces roughly $24,000. Your portfolio just created more growth than your annual savings. Without overtime, without a promotion, without negotiating a raise, without changing jobs, without giving another hour of your life to an employer, your capital did the work. This is the real shift. Before this point, labor is usually the dominant engine. After this point, capital begins competing with labor. Sometimes it even starts outworking it. That is a major psychological turning point. But here is what confuses people. The math changes before the feeling changes. In year 1, 300,000 may become 324,000. Good, but not freedom. In year 2, maybe around 350,000. In year 3, perhaps around 380,000. By year 5, maybe 440 or 450,000, depending on contributions and market. This is where many investors lose patience. They expected compounding to feel dramatic once the account became serious. They expected a surge. Instead, it still feels like a machine working quietly in the background. But compounding has always worked this way. It starts invisibly, then it becomes noticeable, then it becomes meaningful, then it becomes powerful. Then, much later, it begins to feel overwhelming. The early part of the curve is quiet because the base is still forming. The later part becomes powerful because returns begin earning. Returns on a large enough base that the human mind can finally feel the acceleration. $300,000 is not where the explosion happens. It is where the curve begins bending. That is why this stage must be protected. The most dangerous thing about $300,000 is not that it is too little. The most dangerous thing is that it feels like enough to justify interruption. After years of discipline, you finally feel that you have earned relief. You have built something real. You are no longer at the beginning. The number has weight. Then the mind begins negotiating. Maybe I can upgrade the car. Maybe I can finally buy the bigger house. Maybe I can take some money out. Maybe I can stop contributing for a while. Maybe I can take more risk and reach 1 million faster. Maybe I can sell during this downturn and buy again when things feel safer. These thoughts sound reasonable because they come after a real achievement. That is what makes them dangerous. A foolish temptation at $10,000 is easy to recognize. A foolish temptation at $300,000 often sounds mature. You tell yourself you deserve it. And in one sense, you do. But deserving something does not mean taking it is wise. The largest threat to compounding at $300,000 is not usually inflation, interest rates, or the next market correction. It is the investor interrupting the chain right when the chain is becoming powerful. Compounding hates interruptions. It needs time. It needs continuity. It needs gains to remain inside the system long enough to produce more gains. A dollar removed from a small account is costly. A dollar removed from a compounding engine is far more costly. Because it is not only the dollar you lose, it is the entire future return stream that dollar would have created. That is why lifestyle upgrades are so dangerous at this level. A $40,000 car is not just a $40,000 car at 8% over 20 years. That $40,000 could become roughly $185,000. A $60,000 purchase is not just $60,000. At 8% over 20 years, it could become roughly $280,000. The real cost is not the purchase. The real cost is the future momentum you erased. Most people never calculate this because present pleasure is visible, and future compounding is invisible. The car is visible. The trip is visible. The bigger house is visible. The better kitchen is visible. The lost future balance is invisible. But invisible does not mean unreal. That is why the people who eventually retire with several $1 million often make a strange decision around this stage. They stay boring. They do not suddenly upgrade everything. They do not turn the account into a status symbol. They do not make the portfolio serve the ego. They understand that $300,000 is not the reward. It is the engine starting. You do not dismantle the engine when it starts working. You let it run. The second danger is market fear. At $300,000, normal volatility begins to feel personal. A 5% correction turns $300,000 into $225,000. That is a $75,000 decline. When your account was $30,000, a 25% decline was $7,500. Painful, but not psychologically devastating. At $300,000, the decline can feel like years of work disappearing. You remember how hard the first $50,000 was. You remember how long the first $100,000 took. You remember every year of sacrifice. And now a normal market correction seems to erase part of your life. So you do what feels rational. You sell, you move to cash. You tell yourself you will buy back when things feel safer. But markets do not wait for your emotions to recover. If you sell at $225,000 and wait for comfort, you now need to make another correct decision. You need to re-enter before the recovery has already happened. That is much harder than people think. The market often recovers while the news is still frightening. The price can move before confidence returns. By the time you feel safe again, your portfolio might have recovered to $300,000. If you had stayed invested, but instead you are still sitting in cash at $225,000. That one emotional decision did not just cost you money, it cost you momentum. And momentum is the heart of compounding. The real power of compounding is not simply growth. It is continuous growth, growth that stays in place, growth that becomes the base for the next layer of growth, growth that stacks on top of previous growth. When you break the chain, you reset the timeline. This is why investors who build multi-million-dollar portfolios rarely make dramatic moves. They are not constantly clever. They are consistent. They stay invested. They continue contributing. They rebalance deliberately. They avoid panic. They avoid breaking the system. That sounds simple. It is not easy. At $300,000, risk management becomes behavioral management. You are no longer managing only returns. You are managing your ability to stay in the game. That means your portfolio must match your real temperament. If a 25% decline will make you sell, your allocation may be too aggressive. The best portfolio is not the one with the highest theoretical return. The best portfolio is the one you can hold through the bad years without self-destruction. Now another shift begins, and most people miss it. Career leverage changes. When your portfolio is small, your biggest financial lever is usually income. A $10,000 raise matters enormously. A promotion matters. A better job matters. Your portfolio is too small to carry much weight, but around $300,000, the portfolio becomes a serious lever. An 8% year can produce $24,000 of growth. That is like a major raise, except you did not need permission from a boss. You did not need a new title. You did not need to sell more of your life. Your capital quietly negotiated on your behalf. This does not mean income stops mattering. Income still matters. Saving still matters. Your career still matters. But the portfolio has become a partner from this point forward. Staying invested and protecting the capital may matter as much as earning the next raise. In strong years, the portfolio may do more for your net worth than your job does. That requires a new mindset. Many people keep thinking only like workers after their capital has become a meaningful engine. They obsess over salary and underestimate the asset base they spent years building. The better way is to see the stages. Your paycheck helped build $300,000. Your portfolio helps build $1 million. Those are different phases. In the first phase, contribution discipline is the main engine. In the second phase, contribution discipline plus compounding becomes the engine. Later, compounding becomes the dominant engine. But only if you let it keep running. This is where impatience becomes another trap. At $300,000, the distance to $1 million still feels large. You are almost 1/3 of the way there mathematically, but psychologically it may feel like the real mountain is still ahead. That can make normal investing feel too slow. So people start chasing. They concentrate too much in one stock. They use leverage they do not understand. They chase crypto, options, private deals, hot sectors, or speculative real estate because the straight path feels boring. Sometimes these bets work. Often they destroy the base that would have compounded into freedom if left alone. At $300,000, you have enough money to make dangerous impatience feel sophisticated. A person with $5,000 may gamble because he wants out. A person with $300,000 may gamble because he wants faster. Both can be dangerous, but the second person has far more to lose. The irony is that the natural compounding curve is just beginning to become powerful, and the investor chooses that exact moment to abandon it for excitement. That is like digging a well for years, finding water, and walking away. Because the first bucket did not fill quickly enough, do not do that. The years immediately after reaching $300,000 can be some of the most important compounding years of your life. The base is large enough to matter, but the goal is still far enough away that patience is required. This is the bridge stage. You are no longer poor in capital, but you are not yet free. That stage requires maturity. The reward is visible enough to tempt you, but incomplete enough to frustrate you. This is where investors either become serious or become careless. The serious investor protects the base. The careless investor demands that the base perform miracles. Now look at the long math. If $300,000 compounds at 8% with no additional contributions, it can become roughly $647,000 in 10 years. In 15 years, it can be close to $950,000. In 20 years, it can be around $1.4 million. That is without adding another dollar if the investor continues contributing. The path to $1 million can become much shorter. The exact numbers depend on sequence, taxes, fees, returns, and behavior. But the direction is clear. The account is no longer relying only on new savings. The old money is pulling the new money forward. That is what people work so hard to reach. And that is why interruption is so costly. At $300,000, your portfolio is not a prize. It is productive infrastructure. If you dismantle it for consumption, you are selling the factory to buy products. If you preserve it, the factory can keep producing. Most people are trained to consume rewards. Wealth builders learn to preserve engines. The most dangerous sentence at this stage is, "I can afford it." Maybe you can, but affordability is not the same as wisdom. The better question is different. Can the compounding engine afford this interruption? Will this decision strengthen the system or weaken it? Does this purchase buy true value, or does it buy temporary status at the cost of future freedom? Those questions change the decision. A person who asks only whether the payment fits may remain trapped. A person who asks whether the system stays intact begins thinking like an owner. That is the identity shift. At first, you were someone saving money. Now you are someone protecting capital. That is a higher responsibility. The discipline that gets you to 300,000 is not exactly the same discipline that gets you to 1 million. Early discipline is sacrifice. Later discipline is preservation. At the beginning, you force money into the system. Later, you stop yourself from pulling money out. At the beginning, you fight small numbers. Later, you fight large temptations. At the beginning, you fight discouragement. Later, you fight impatience. At the beginning, you fight the feeling that nothing is happening. Later, you fight the feeling that enough has happened to justify interruption. Both phases require character, but the traps change. This is why some people are good at accumulating but bad at compounding. They can save aggressively, but once the account gets large, they meddle. They change strategies. They time the market. They chase performance. They inflate lifestyle. They try to become too clever. The great investor often appears inactive because he understands that inactivity can be one of the highest valued decisions. Doing nothing is not always laziness. Sometimes doing nothing is discipline. Not selling during a correction, not upgrading the car, not chasing the hot asset, not interrupting the chain, not making the portfolio serve the ego. That is internal work. The world does not see it, but the account eventually does. If you protect the chain, the numbers begin changing quickly. At 300,000, an 8% return is 24,000. At 500,000, it is 40,000. At 750,000, it is 60,000. At 1 million, it is 80,000. At 1.5 million, it is 120,000. At some point, the annual growth from capital can exceed the salary that originally funded the portfolio. That is when money begins outworking labor. It will not happen smoothly. There will be recessions, there will be declines large enough to hurt, there will be years when your portfolio falls by 6 figures. There will be moments when the system feels broken. But if the long-term structure remains intact, productive assets can eventually turn capital into the main engine. The investor who reaches that stage may look lucky to outsiders, but luck is not the whole explanation. The person avoided interruption. That is the invisible achievement. Most people do not see the mistakes you did not make. They do not see the car you did not buy, the panic sale you did not make, the vacation you delayed, the risky deal you rejected, the correction you endured, the contribution you continued, the lifestyle upgrade you postponed. Wealth is often built as much by the things you do not do as by the things you do. Avoiding a catastrophic interruption may be one of the highest return decisions you ever make. If you are still working toward $300,000, do not be discouraged by the slow phase. The slow phase is not proof that the system is broken. It is proof that the base is still small. Your job is to keep building the base. At 10,000, keep going. At 50,000, keep going. At 100,000, keep going. At 200,000, keep going. When the account begins to move in ways that feel meaningful, do not become reckless. Understand that you are approaching the point where capital begins to matter more. And if you are already near $300,000, the message is simple. Do not interrupt. Do not let a normal market correction make you abandon a long-term system. Do not let a large number tempt you into a lifestyle that stops the curve. Do not chase shortcuts because the account does not yet feel like freedom. Do not make the portfolio prove itself faster than compounding naturally works. Let the machine run. You spent years building it, let it work. That does not mean ignoring risk. It means managing risk intelligently. Keep an allocation you can actually hold. Keep emergency cash outside the portfolio. Avoid concentration that could destroy the base. Keep fees low. Understand taxes. Continue investing if possible. Rebalance deliberately, but do not confuse good oversight with constant interference. A good system needs management. It does not need panic. There is also a deeper test here. At $300,000, you begin to discover whether you want wealth or only the appearance of wealth. If you want the appearance, the number will be hard to preserve because the world offers endless ways to convert capital into status. If you want freedom, you will protect the number even when nobody understands why you are still living below your means. That is the quiet test. Freedom requires delayed visibility. You may look normal while becoming financially powerful. You may drive the same car, live in the same home, wear the same clothes, avoid showing off, continue investing. Let people underestimate you. That may be the superior path. The account does not need applause. The account needs time. Your future self will not care whether people were impressed by your spending at $300,000. Your future self will care whether the compounding chain remained intact. That is who you are serving. The one who may retire earlier, the one who may stop tolerating a bad job, the one who may help family without panic, the one who may sleep better because capital is producing income, the one who may look back and realize that the boring years were not wasted. They were the years the machine was allowed to run. This is what people misunderstand when they reach a milestone and feel disappointed. They think disappointment means the milestone failed. Often it means the milestone is not the kind of milestone they thought it was. $300,000 is not a freedom milestone. It is a leverage milestone. It is where the role of your capital begins to change. It is where your money starts working at a speed that can compete with your effort. It is where the curve begins bending upward. It is where interruption becomes much more expensive. It is where psychology becomes as important as math. The unaware investor sees $300,000 and thinks, I deserve to spend. The aware investor sees $300,000 and thinks the engine is starting. The unaware investor sees a correction and thinks, I need to get out. The aware investor thinks, this is volatility and my system was designed for it. The unaware investor sees the gap to 1 million and becomes impatient. The aware investor understands that the next phase is structurally different from the first. The unaware investor breaks the chain. The aware investor protects it over time. That difference becomes enormous. So the question is not only how to reach $300,000, the question is what you do after you reach it. That is where the real turning point lives. If you protect the system, $300,000 can become $500,000, then $700,000, then $1 million, then more. If you interrupt the system, $300,000 can become a story about what almost happened, almost free, almost wealthy, almost able to let compounding take over. Many people are full of almosts. They almost let the recovery happen. They almost avoided lifestyle inflation. They almost reached escape velocity. The tragedy is that the hardest part had already been done. They built the base. They just did not protect it long enough. Do not become that person. If you are near $300,000, respect the moment. Do not worship it. Do not spend it. Do not fear it. Do not force it. Respect it. It is the point where your financial life begins shifting from labor, driven to capital, assisted. It is where patience starts becoming more valuable every year. It is where quiet decisions matter more than loud ones. The next millionaires are often not created by brilliant trades. They are created by people who reached this stage and refused to interrupt the curve. They stayed boring. They stayed invested. They kept contributing. They managed risk. They avoided panic. They avoided unnecessary status. They let the machine run. And years later, the same people who wondered why 300,000 did not feel like freedom finally understood. It was not freedom. It was the engine that could build it. At $300,000, compounding is not yet unstoppable, but if you protect it, it begins becoming very hard to stop.